Recovery Reform is a podcast that provides educational content while addressing the stigma against drugs and the people who use them. Expertise meets lived experience as the hosts and their respective guests unpack the multifaceted cause that is recovery reform. Hello, welcome back to the Recovery Reform Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Taylor Nichols, and I'm here with my new friend, Kirsten, aka Sobriety Bestie. And Kirsten is someone who has a lot of lived experience, a lot of experience that we share in leaving 12-step specifically. And Kirsten is also someone who is a coach. And so today we're just going to talk about but really I'm going to rant and, we'll just get into it immediately. First of all, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I genuinely appreciate that. And I kind of just want to jump in with your experience in, finding 12-step. Finding doesn't sound accurate, but, often being kind of forced into it for many people. But I'm not going to lead here. Just how did you end up in 12-step?
Yeah, well, I ended up in rehab first. So I got sober in 2009, and I was really clear when I got sober. I didn't want to get sober ever. I wanted to not die. That was like literally what I was choosing at that time. And Taylor, I really related to your story. I heard about when you were 7 and you were in the hospital and you realized that you were getting a second shot at life after your surgeries and stuff. And that's when you wanted to be a doctor. That really hit me deeply because that's kind of what happened at the end of my drinking. Very different, but I had a moment where I looked in a mirror and I knew I was about to die. And I was like, oh shit. Like it looked like my soul was about to leave my body and I just knew I was about to die and it freaked me out. And so it was right after that I ended up going to rehab. So I never wanted to quit drinking. I literally was choosing life at that moment because alcohol and anxiety were killing me. And so I was like, I need to live. And so I need to tell somebody about it. And so I was very clear with a friend that I told, I don't want to go to a cult religion, nothing 12-step, F that shit. And so she found me a non-12-step rehab. And so then I flew down to that rehab and I went there and there was an optional AA meeting once a week there. And nobody was going. Everybody that was in the rehab was anti-AA. I'd never been. I just knew it wasn't for me. I'm not an alcoholic. Like when we went around the circle and identified, everybody said, I'm Bob, I'm an alcoholic, I'm Macaulay, I'm an alcoholic. I said, I'm Kirsten, I have anxiety. I don't want to become an alcoholic. They said that was denial. I'm like, I just didn't like that language, and I still, the way that I felt before I ever got to AA is kind of how I feel now, but now I have more experience. But I was indoctrinated into the whole recovery ideology. And so, there was a once a week meeting and it was the Tuesday of my last week of rehab. Like I was going to go home on Thursday and I was scared because I didn't know how to fly without drinking. So I have to get on a plane and go home. So I'm like, how am I going to even get home without drinking? But rehab's expensive, obviously. And it's, just taken a month out of my life. And so there was an optional AA meeting and there was this guy at my rehab who was famous. They actually filmed him. They kicked us out of rehab for the day and they filmed him coming in for the show Intervention. Or one of those intervention shows. This was 2009. I don't remember what it was called. And he was famous. I knew his music. He was a hip hop artist. I liked his songs. And so he was all about AA. And so he was going to go to that last meeting. And so I thought he was cool. So I went because it's like, well, if he likes it and I like him, I'd seen him on the VMAs. I didn't really know him, right? Obviously. So I was like, well, I'll go and give it one shot. And so I went with hip hop in the druggy buggy down to the AA meeting. And I walked in the door and I was like, I'm not going to let them call me, say I'm an alcoholic. I don't want to be here. And I went into the sober living house. It was on the beach in Malibu. And they said, is it anybody's first meeting? And I was like, oh, it's my first meeting. The biggest mistake. Don't ever admit that, man. That's like the invitation to be coercively controlled. They're like, that's like when you're saying, hey, wolves, I'm the vulnerable one here. Come eat me. Come attack me. So this is my first meeting. And then all 200 of them were totally silent. And it was the kind of meeting where you go around in a circle and you say your name and obviously they want you to identify as an alcoholic. So I said, my name is Kirsten, and the whole room went silent. And then at that point, I am like, I don't know, I was 28 days into rehab because it was right before I left. So I'm 28 days sober from alcohol. And I was probably at that point 2 weeks sober from benzos, from Klonopin. So I am a hot, freaking mess of anxiety, of dysregulation, of so uncomfortable in my skin. And to have 200 people staring at me and waiting, the seconds kept ticking on and I couldn't take it. And I was like, at that point, I'm choosing between having a panic attack in front of 200 strangers or saying the words I was never going to say and betraying myself, which is, I'm an alcoholic. Hip hop is elbowing me. He's like, alcoholic, alcoholic. And I was like, fuck you. You're no longer cool, man. Like, stop that. And eventually I capitulated and it's now I understand it's called coercive control. And I said, I'm an alcoholic. And so that was my introduction to AA. Within the first 5 minutes of my first meeting, it was like pretty messed up. So I didn't want to go, but I did. And then I was so scared when I got out of rehab that Thursday night, I was like, why don't I go to one more meeting? I just got out of rehab. So I got back to my place in San Francisco. There was one down the street. And I walked up to that meeting and I still didn't want to go in. It's very, very hard to walk in that door to a religious cult when you really don't want to be there. And again, I'm kind of in my mind, I'm not choosing, do I want to go to AA? I'm choosing, do I want to live or do I want to go to a cult? Like, do I want to die or go to a cult? That's kind of what it felt like for me. And it was a weird joke too, because like Kitty Corner is a bar that I always went to on Thursday nights in San Francisco in the marina. And here I am looking at my friends. I could see them in the bar. I know the bartender is going to put my drink on the counter if I walk in. And then I'm looking over here at the cult and I'm like, and then really what got me was rehab was so expensive. I can't be the one who drinks the night I get out of rehab. So that was just like my thought process at that moment. So I walked into the religious cult and then I got love bombed like a lot of us do. And then I stayed because of the love bombing.
Spent part of my adult life in the marina in San Francisco. Well, I didn't live there, but I spent some time at those bars. Now I got to know which one.
Balboa.
Oh yeah. Spend some time there for sure.
Totally. It's great. Kitty Corner is the an AA clubhouse.
I did not know that, but now I know we very well may have crossed paths at Balboa Cafe. But I think, well, one, I think that story is fascinating on many levels, and I'm curious how you process that and what you felt after that, and they love bomb you, and you feel that you're now like attached to this, like you're being drawn in. How do you even unravel that?
So the part where they're drawing me in?
Or after what your thought process was after that.
So I met like 6 women that night. One of them circled all the meetings that they all circled the meetings they like to go to in this pamphlet. And so they're like, if you see 4 circles, that means we're all going to be there. You should come meet us and then we'll have dinner and we're going to be your friends. You need sober friends, right? So they're offering friendship. And one woman said, come meet me at a meeting tomorrow. And I wasn't going to go to another meeting. I was just going to go the night I got out of rehab. So she's like, meet me tomorrow and we'll get coffee after. So we go to the meeting and I'm thinking we're going to get coffee to hang out. She opens up the AA, the big book, the book Alcoholics Anonymous, and starts reading the preamble to the first edition it just sounded like Peanuts where they go, wah, 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 wah. In 1955, we mushroomed to more people in our fellowship. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, I'm literally twitching from coming off benzos and I'm brand new sober out of rehab. And you want to tell me about what some cult leader did in the 50s or the 30s? And it was just so weird. And it reminded me of when I was in grade school and my best friend was Jehovah's Witness. And I went over to her house one time and we all played. And then her mom made brownies and we came inside to sit down. And all of a sudden there was all these books everywhere. And we started reading out of their Bible or whatever it's called. I don't even know. And that's what it felt like for me. And I went home. They gave me all these books and told me to come back every week for brownies and reading. And I told my mom was horrified that somebody was trying to indoctrinate me into their religion, basically. So my mom threw the books away. And that's what it reminded me of when I got to AA. I was like, I don't want to read your book. Like, I don't want this. I wanted friendship though. And that's why part of the reason why I feel so strongly about it now is because there were a lot of needs that were being met. And I do feel like we have a lot of needs, or at least I did when I got sober. I really wanted sober friends. That was really helpful. The community, the connection, or even what felt like love. Now I know it wasn't love. There's a difference between cult friendships, love bombing, and actual real connection. And some of the friends I had in AA, it was genuine and we've remained friends. And those friends are also no longer in AA, interestingly enough. So the connection was around, when you believe what I believe, I'll love you. But if you leave, that goes away, because we're connected by the belief system. And if you believe something else, then, well, quite frankly, when you leave AA, you're thought to be dangerous, right? And so you get shunned because they might catch what I have, which I would call my next evolution. I evolved out of that mindset, or that ideology, which I don't think I ever needed it in the first place. I think there's non-harmful ways to get sober. So the way that I see it all now is I would never recommend anybody to go to AA. But if someone tells me they feel like it's aligned for them, do your thing, trust yourself, whatever is right for you, do what's right for you. But I would never tell anybody to go, because it's harmful. I would never, ever want to put anybody in harm's way. Taylor, I heard you talk something about, once you realized that recovery ideology was harmful, that you started unlearning some of it. I really related to that, because that's how, the minute that I realized it was, in my mind, all bullshit, it all blew up one day in 2020. I left AA right when the pandemic started. So I was in AA for 10 years and I left 5 years ago. But the minute that I saw that it was like all bullshit, it was like, boom, the same way that I realized Santa wasn't real. It didn't matter how many presents Santa left under the tree, how much I loved the idea of Santa, how many cookies I baked for Santa, how Santa hugged me when I was a kid. He actually drove up on a fire truck when I was a little kid, and I hugged Santa. I saw Santa at the mall. It didn't matter how much I liked Santa or how real Santa seemed. The minute I realized it was a lie, it was over. And that's exactly how I felt about AA. Didn't matter how much I loved it. I mean, I literally cried my eyes out on Bill Wilson's grave. I was a true believer. I went to his house, his grave. I went to Dr. Bob's grave. What the fuck? I don't even like Dr. Bob. Went to Dr. Bob's house. But Akron, Ohio is where they have the Founders Day every year. So I went there with the sponsee. I was like all in. And then it was like, boom, oh, it's all bullshit? Okay. And I will not lead somebody consciously into harm. If I'm unaware that I'm doing that, that's one thing. But the minute that I recognize that it's harmful, I'm out. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. It doesn't matter how hard it was to leave. In fact, it was harder for me to leave AA than it was for me to get sober, which sounds bananas, I'm sure, to a lot of people, but it's simply true.
I mean, that is what you're describing is how cults operate, right? They form your community, and then they shun and isolate you if you leave, and make the cost of leaving high intentionally. But that makes it very much like once you leave, you're gone, you're out, exactly like you're describing. And so it is, and I know Macaulay has thoughts about AA in terms of its actual like utility and the way that the book is actually written, and versus the way that it's often practiced, and the way it's implemented by people in different settings. And Macaulay, if you want to talk about that, I welcome it. But I do want to just say, like, when you're Kirsten, when you're talking about harm, like, we don't know, we've never measured the harm. We know the efficacy is not particularly high. The numbers vary based on what sort of studies you want to look at, but even by AA's own admission and their own like biased data, it's not very high. But you don't know what the harm is, right? And in medicine, I always say this, and I probably sound like a broken record talking about it, but like, if we know what a number needed to treat is, and we know what the number needed to harm is, and the lower the number, the more efficacious or the more harmful something is. If the number needed to harm is lower than the number needed to treat, it would be unethical for me to recommend that drug.
Right.
Except maybe under very, very, very specific circumstances. But in general, that would be unethical. And I could, that could be malpractice, and I could like lose my license for that. Yet we continue to tell people to go to something that we know is harmful. Even people who are true believers understand that can cause harm for some people, but they don't know what the number is. And I would argue that it is theoretically, not even theoretically possible, it is very possible that number needed to harm is in fact lower than the number needed to treat. And so it would be unethical for me as a physician, if that were the case, to recommend that is a course of treatment. Yet here we are, where that is sort of widely utilized systemically, and yet could be unethical as a recommendation. Now, that is, again, to your point, if it's working for somebody, it's working for somebody. And I'm not going to fault anybody for finding what works for them. I believe that anybody can pursue whatever path works for them as long as it is aligned with their individual beliefs and goals. But to mandate that or to suggest that that is the only potential option or the most effective option, which is simply untrue, and it's harmful, you might actually be causing harm to people by recommending that as the only or the most effective option. So I completely agree with you, and I want to like validate what you're saying. Like, from a data perspective, from a medical perspective, that would be completely aligned with medical ethics.
Yeah. My background's not in medicine, but it's in statistics. I have a master's in statistics. So my background's like in big data and stuff like that. So I'm aware of like looking at studies and not lying with studies. And like, to me, it's not just even when we talk about the harm of AA, there's a lot of things that come top of mind to me. The first thing, obviously, is an emotional thing about my friends who are no longer alive, where I think that their suicide is in big part due to the ideology that was inside their head that AA is the only way. And so if it's not working for you and you're hopeless, that no, try it, do more of what's not working if it's not working for you. And then when they take their own lives, who's to blame there? It's never AA. You know what I mean? It's always, if they didn't do all their amends, there's always some BS words that they justify why it's okay that these people are no longer alive. And it's like, one of my friends in specific, it was like, when he died, that was my first crack in AA's brainwashing. Cause I was like, fuck, AA's, it's because of AA, like with him specifically, because I knew him and I knew what he told me. And his sponsor wouldn't let him get any outside help other than AA help until he finished his 5th step, and he didn't make it. And so like so there's that harm. And I don't even know how you would measure that harm in an anonymous program. And when it comes to something like unaliving yourself, it's hard to say that it was one thing or what was it. And there's so much there, right? But what about the other harm that people aren't really seeing? Like when I loved AA, when I say I was a true believer, I loved AA when I was in it, not in the beginning, right? I had to get fully indoctrinated into the ideology. I had to go through, once I went through the religious conversion completely, because it's a religious conversion program, it's a path to God. So you get converted into their religion, into Bill Wilson's religion, essentially. Yeah. And so once I got converted and kind of misguided, I wouldn't quite say it was gaslighting, because the people who said what they said believed it to be true. So it was misdiagnosed as alcoholic, when now I know that that's not even a thing. It's called alcohol use disorder. And so alcoholism and alcohol use disorder are two very different things. And so I go with alcohol use disorder, and that I don't even qualify when I've been 12 months sober, like, right? Because it's kind of your behavior up to like in the past year. At least I think that's how it goes. And so the harm, what about the religious harm that I received? Like, I was harmed and not knowing it, and harming other people and not knowing it, because I'm basically telling you, fuck your agency. You need to be dependent upon a sponsor on the group and on a higher power. You're trapped. You need a free labor for the rest of your life for this program. You have to always do work here. You need a daily reprieve, which is totally made up baloney, which is you basically need to be addicted to Alcoholics Anonymous so that you can feel a certain way so that you don't pick up, because you have this fatal progressive disease running in the background. You have a spiritual malady, more baloney. It's fine if you want to choose spirituality or religion or a cult, although nobody really joins a cult, right? We just leave them. But to me, it's not the individuals who were 13th stepping or the predators or whatever, or even my friends who died. It's literally, to me, the ideology is harmful in and of itself. And so I don't think it's possible to safely use Alcoholics Anonymous. I think it harms, full stop, because you're being taught that you have a disease. That's an idea. That's not an agreed upon concept by just medical people in general. So you're taught you have this disease. It wants you dead. You're taught that you can't trust your thinking. So maybe this isn't medicine, maybe this is more psychology, but if you tell somebody who's vulnerable, like me, like thinking I'm going to die, and if I need to believe this ideology, otherwise I'm going to die, or get institutionalized or get arrested, right? Jails, institutions, or death. You're telling me I can't trust my own thinking. You're telling me I have to ask my sponsor like I'm a 3-year-old to get all sorts of things. Then you get the rogue ones who are telling me which jobs I should have or who I should date or whatever. And I know that's individual, but the ideology in and of itself is making you betray yourself. You cannot trust your thinking. Even the higher power thing to me is very damaging. Now, I understand that people are religious and we all have our free choice, but to coerce someone like me who wasn't religious when I got there, that I need to be developing a relationship with something essentially outside of myself, where I can't just say, I want to do this, then do that. I was a fucking go-getter before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous disabled me. It made me disabled in my ability just to go and get something done, because now I'm praying and waiting for an answer from my higher power, and it has to be aligned with my higher power. I have to turn it over, and so that whole concept to me is harmful. So for me, I don't see, unless there's informed consent, like, hey, bro, it's a religious cult. These are the cons. Here's the pros. It does work for some people. If that's what you want to do, go do it. But no one told me that. They told me it's not religious. It's religious. They also told me it's not a cult, but we need brainwashing. I'm like, what the fuck? And the reason why I even got sunk in, like, okay, so I found out a year after I left AA. I left AA 2020, the very beginning. I left AA April 6, 2020, like early days pandemic. And so a year after I left AA, I got diagnosed autistic. And then 4 years after I left AA, I got diagnosed ADHD, like a year ago right now. So even though like my very first year of my sobriety in 2009, I kept telling my sponsor, I think I'm ADHD. I'm freaking out. I'm all over the place. I can't focus my mind. And she's like, no, your only problem is alcoholism. And the only solution you ever need is the 12 steps. So I'm being misdiagnosed in this program, not getting properly supported for what's actually going on. I have no idea that I should be looking at nutrition or other certain things that are going to really help me optimize my brain. I choose to be sober today, abstinent, so I don't use any medication at all. I don't even use Tylenol. I'm not on ADHD meds. That's my choice. I do all sorts of like weird biohacking things. I love data. I love reading peer-reviewed studies. I love, like, I do ketogenic. My brain works really good on ketones. I do red light therapy every day. I have like a brain zapper helmet thing that I wear. I do like all the things that I've read science about that work, and I get results. So like, I'm just a little different. That's fine. But it's not managed through praying. It's not managed through going to church basements and surrendering my will and my life. Like, surrender your will and your life? What the fuck are you talking about? Why? It's my solution, surrendering my will and my life. But when I got there, the reason why, I know I'm like going on and on and on. The reason why I got locked in so deep, though, is because when I was about 90 days sober, this guy got up and told my story. He was more than twice my age. He was the opposite, like, ethnicity, the opposite gender, the opposite sexual orientation. Every single thing about him from the outside seemed completely different. And he told my story. So what was he doing? He was talking about his thoughts, his feelings, his perceptions, his experience of the world. And he called it all alcoholism. Now, in hindsight, I think he was autistic and probably ADHD, and he was describing that. He was describing his sensory sensitivities, his social differences, all of these things, but he called it all alcoholism. And that's why I refuse to use the word alcoholism, because it locked me into the system at an identity level that screwed me. But I loved it at the time. So it's like such a weird thing to unpack. I didn't know I was being harmed and slowly losing my self-esteem, my self-trust, my agency, all under the false pretense that I had this monster inside that wanted me dead, so I can't trust myself. So I don't even think of AA as a viable solution for anyone. But if you want to go. Trust yourself. That's kind of, if you want to know how I really feel.
Yeah, no, and I kind of have the same belief and experience just in being in those spaces for so long, and leaving those spaces and starting to look at it and unpack it, and it's disturbing when you start to look at it. And I often will say that, like, it is entirely unethical to suggest that space, unless someone is, you can co-sign someone if they are, like, doing their own research and they're like, hey, I see all of this, I don't care, I still want to engage in it, then of course I'm going to respect someone's autonomy, because I always talk about radical autonomy, and that means radical. It means that if someone wants to do something like that, okay, cool, but people should actually have informed consent. And the issue is that the entire cult is built upon robbing people of informed consent, because any sort of questioning is seen as contempt prior to investigation, even if you have deeply investigated. And so there's always going to be a cliche, a slogan or a saying that is weaponized and employed to disempower people and to indoctrinate them into subservience. And I think you perfectly articulated that being indoctrinated into this subservient state, when you're actually a very powerful being, not a powerless person who's an addict and alcoholic. And I think that you also perfectly articulated the misdiagnosis, and being diagnosed with the ism, as I always say, like, and it just encompasses everything, and it bypasses everything. So instead of actually getting the opportunity to address these underlying things that often are being masked with like the consumption of alcohol or substances, those things are pushed to the side, seen as outside issues, and people are often straight up discouraged from seeking support that could actually help them to unearth that stuff. And so what you have is, you have a lot of people who are congregating into a shared space that are, one, taught to be performative. Their legitimate concerns are being bypassed, and they're embodying a label based on stigma. And so what that does is it creates this culture to where you have people who really have not addressed the things that they really should, or and I don't like to even frame it like that, because if they were never given the opportunity, it's not that they're actively choosing not to engage in some sort of resource. Those resources are being invalidated. And so ultimately, this is kind of a side note here, but a lot of my kind of journey, and I have to kind of continue to check in with this, is that I get very frustrated when I hear the really dogmatic stuff that members are spewing. And at the same time, I have to constantly remind myself that this is ultimately someone who has been marginalized, indoctrinated, and harmed. And it's hard when the survivor, or in this case, like the victim, becomes the perpetrator. And that's the whole structure of 12-step. If the 12th step didn't exist, then I think a lot of us who have left the cult would not be as strongly against it, because it would just be, okay, you want to go ahead, educate yourself on the rape culture, educate yourself on the misogyny, educate yourself on the pseudoscience, but there you go, you can go ahead and go. Now it gets tricky when you're like, even just supporting, I mean, and now I'm contradicting myself, because I've started to have this sort of reckoning with that, with even passively co-signing someone who's engaging in their own autonomy, because then I'm like, well, hold on there. There has to be a little caveat here. It's that I support you engaging in your autonomy and going to 12-step if you don't sponsor people, basically. If you don't sponsor people, but if you're someone who's going and you're going to sponsor people, that's where I'm like, no, across the board, I don't support it. You know what I mean? And that's the issue here, is that it's all built upon recruiting new people through performative shares and in disrespect of the tradition. So a lot of this stuff, like what Taylor was kind of referring to, is, like you, Kirsten, I was in it, I was like, this is it. This is what I do. So that means I'm very well versed in the literature, the steps, the traditions, the concepts. And what that means now, is someone who's deprogrammed and left, that I have a very informed perspective on all of this stuff, as you do. And that's why I really value your content, is that you're not just spewing shit that you heard someone else say. This is your real lived experience, and you have an expert level understanding of this stuff. And the thing here is that what Taylor was referring to, and I just want to clarify for those listening and maybe didn't hear the other episode, is that I do think that a lot of the issues that we do see are because there's this kind of like new version that has been implemented in a very problematic way. I also think the old version is problematic and outdated and dogmatic, but I do think that the main issues that I see here are that it's cultural and systemic dominance is is made possible in direct disrespect of the traditions, and that concepts that were not even like really solid or part of the initial process have now become commonplace and normal. And so do I think that if it's just by the book that it's good? No, I don't at all. I think the book is outdated and terrible. I don't think it's a good book, and I think it's like a quack doctor and a charlatan that put this book together. But with that being said, a lot of these issues are because it was supposed to be more of a grassroots thing that was low key and was available to people who had actually tried everything. Now, what was everything in the late 30s? Not very much stuff. You know what I mean? Like being put into a sanitarium or a modern day mental facility.
Belladonna.
Yeah, being given belladonna. So the thing is that the dogma has persisted. It's been solidified, and we've had advancements within the field. And so now it's just so outdated that it's like it's malpractice, I believe, across the board to associate this with any sort of medical treatment, or for it to be in sort of any inpatient facility, even mention of it. It's just like it's something that I think people should be able to, outside of these clinical settings or these inpatient settings, look into if they would like to. And then again, I would say, I'm fine with saying this. Don't sponsor people. Just keep it to yourself. You can, performatively share in the meetings. That counts as working the 12th step. You can just, attract people, even though you're really promoting it. So that's totally fine. And I really want to say this from a less snarky place now. You're valid just if you're doing that. And, there's this whole idea that you're invalid if you're not sponsoring, and that you're not doing everything you should be. No, look, if you find value in it, even though I disagree with it fundamentally, it's okay to not sponsor people. It's okay to engage. You're going to be judged for sure. But I wanted to mention that. And really, you went into so many amazing points that now I'm just like going off the rails here. So Taylor, if you want to help rein it in a little bit, and then I'll hop back in a second, because I'll never stop.
One of the things that I've been sort of thinking about as you've had this discussion is, Kirsten, one of the things you said was just identifying as an alcoholic was the thing that harmed you and started this sort of perpetuation of this cycle. And it's just something that, as little as language and using person first language, and instead of identifying somebody as what maybe, whether or not you wanted to identify that way, even if you did, you would say that was your worst trait or the thing that you wanted to identify and embody the least of all of the things that make you, right? And so making people identify by the thing that they would think is the most problematic, the most shameful, the least beneficial thing for them, and making them identify that by that is harmful in and of itself. No matter what anyone says, the idea of saying your name and that you are the thing that you dislike the most is harmful. No matter what anybody says to me, they will not convince me that that is a good idea. And the idea that we should be doing that to other people and saying, no, but don't forget, you're an alcoholic or you're an addict. Like, we're saying, hey, you're a person who uses drugs, you're a person who drinks alcohol, you're a person who, whatever, person first language matters. And it matters in that stigma that you then are absorbing and you are putting back on yourself, and you're self-stigmatizing, and now you're self-shaming. And it perpetuates this cycle of negativity that essentially helped open the door to what became problematic relationship with AA, right?
It locks you in the system.
Right. If you hadn't started to process that internally, like that I am this thing and I need to do something about that. If you're like you said, so 12 months in terms of medicine, like we don't use the terms alcoholic, addict. It's person with a substance use disorder, a person with alcohol use disorder in this case. And then medications are medications for addiction treatment, medications for alcohol use disorder, etc. Alcohol use disorder, you are in early remission starting at 3 months. You're in like sustained remission after 12 months, like you said. So you can still meet criteria, I guess, technically, but you'd be a person with alcohol use disorder in sustained remission.
And they can be recovered and still drinking. I'm like, mind blown.
Right. Right. And so, it's like once you're, and Macaulay and I have had this conversation before, like you can recover from the medical side, like the diagnosis, there is still a diagnostic label for somebody who has had alcohol use disorder and is in remission or is in sustained, like long-term sustained remission. But then is that even worth including unless it's something that we're actively working on? No, but I have patients who still, their last use was 10 years ago or longer, but they're still either on medications for treatment or that's still something that we work on, and that's fine. And that's still part of their diagnosis, is still part of their process. But like Macaulay does not identify as a person with a substance use disorder, is recovered, is not in recovery, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's required to be in recovery. It is not a lifelong sentence, as Macaulay has expressed before. And so I wanted to validate what you said and emphasize the importance of allowing people the opportunity to identify as themselves, as a person with, and yes, whether or not you felt you met the criteria for alcohol use disorder doesn't really matter, other than the fact that that's not what you wanted to embody, right? That's not what you wanted to represent you. And so we should allow people to just be a person, multifaceted characteristics that make them who they are. And one of those things may be that at that time they have alcohol use disorder. And that's something that they want to address. And that's something that we can collectively work on. We can work on together. Like when I have a patient-physician relationship, we're going to work on this problem together. We're going to solve for it. That is not who you are. That's not your identity. I don't want you to identify as an addict or an alcoholic. And I tell people that. I've had people say, well, I'm just an alcoholic. That's how my brain works or whatever. And it's like, well, I don't actually know that that's true. Tell me if you think that is helpful to you to identify that way. Because you can call yourself whatever you want. But I personally think that that's like not what makes you as an individual. So 100%. I think it's so important that you said that. And I think that's something that I just really wanted to like put a pin in and emphasize. Because if nothing else, people take nothing else away from any of these discussions. It's just simply to remember to try to destigmatize everything all the way up to just simply their language and the way they address people. And because that then perpetuates harm. If we perpetuate stigma in the language we use to call people a certain thing, and then they embody that, and they represent that thing within themselves, that can cause harm. That can cause downstream effects of internalized stigma and shame, etc. And so I think it's so important that you said that, and that we emphasize that point especially.
It keeps us stuck 100%. And even though I said I got assessed as autistic, actually I've had 2 autism diagnoses. Both of them were like, yeah, totally. And then ADHD as well. I don't identify as either of those. I do not put my identity on, and this is not an opinion for anybody else. I mean, it's literally just how I think about myself. Because of the trauma of having been for a decade in a religious cult where identity is how I got locked into that system, and therefore didn't actually get to thrive because I was under the wrong ideology, the wrong idea about myself, where I was capped in my understanding of what was available for me. I don't identify as autistic or ADHD. Those are realities for me. I can see from the beginning of my life, I was always I've always had like sensory sensitivity things. I had synesthesia. I used to go to the rave all the time and I would literally see the music, and I knew not everybody was seeing the music. And I just knew I was having a different experience, sensory experience than everybody else. But because I refuse to identify now with anything that's related to dysfunction, I'm able to look with an open mind now that I've deconstructed AA or been on that journey where I'm like, okay, right, well, let me read Like when I found out about autism, I spent 2 years reading every single peer-reviewed article that I could find that was relevant to me. I had a lot of sexual abuse in my childhood, so I looked up a lot of how that all works together and how we're easy prey for predators. They can pick the ones who are socially different, right? And then that trauma compounds and we get re-victimized, and then that can lead into the dysregulation that leads into the alcohol addiction, and then that can lead into the AA and staying in AA because all the easy social relationships in AA. So I looked into everything, and I use labels now as guides so that when I look at how can I make my brain work the best that it can, given that there are some limitations, but still when it comes to the brain, there should be no fucking rules, because guess what? It's plastic. It's not like my bones. Like it changes based upon my environment, my thoughts, like what my beliefs, like literally it's changing all the time. And how do I know that that's totally radically possible? Well, I had no God before I got indoctrinated into a cult religion. And then all of a sudden, God was the most important thing to me. I became this like religious like fanatic in AA. And now I've like deprogrammed that. I'm like, whoa, okay, so what you believe changes your entire life, but then the structure and the function of your brain changes. So now I'm like, right, okay, well, the professionals say ADHD and autism. So I need to actually make a point to organize myself, because I go away from that. So I actually have scheduled dates where I organize myself, because that helps with my ADHD, right? Otherwise, I'm just like, and with autism, I learned all about ketosis, like I said, or I learned about how red light therapy, like red light panels, can really help my mitochondria and my reductive oxidative, whatever. Like I just looked really deeply into it and used that as a guide to get better. And then the only thing that matters is not my identity. What matters is how am I actually doing? And ever since I've been on that approach, which really hasn't been that long, and that's part of why I'm like, this needs to be shouted from the rooftops, because do I really need to be this old in my life for me to figure out how to actually have my brain function? It's literally functioning this past year, my brain, better than it ever has in my entire life, because I have the right framework to look through and I don't hold it tightly. I don't let it constrict me. I'm not out here like celebrating my neurodiversity. I'm like, no, I want my brain to work well. So nothing against neurodiversity or celebrating it, but I want to actually improve myself. I don't want to just accept everything. And I'm not against not accepting myself, but like literally the things that I have done. So I popped out of like a big fog because I had, you know what? You know what helped me a lot more than doing any inventory I ever did in AA? Doing a lab test and finding out I had 2 infections in my gut. So I healed my gut for 2 different infections. I did this round of herbal antibiotics in November, and I popped out of that with my brain. So I can't even tell you, it was like my whole world was different after that. So when my gut infections were healed, my brain works better. My immune system works better. Everything, my brain inflammation went down. So I don't want to accept dysfunction in my life. I don't want to identify with something that's going to limit me. Literally, this is how I look at my identity. I'm a soul inside a body here to evolve. And that probably sounds weird or out there or whatever, but I know both of you have described what I would call, and maybe this is even language from AA, but spiritual experiences. Both of you have had near-death experiences where, whether it was on your getting hit by a car on your bike or like whatever, right? You know, Macaulay. And so when we have these, so for me, I had I don't know, it felt like a near-death experience, or I guess it was more, I don't know, I guess they call it ego death. I accidentally ate a hero's dose of mushrooms when I was in high school. And the reason why I say accidentally, I knew I was eating mushrooms. They were disgusting. And in part because I ate so many of them, we just ate them like it was like dinner. We didn't know, you guys, this is before I'd ever been on the internet. So I had no idea what psychedelics were. I had like drinking like a beer or 2. I thought it was like drinking a beer. And like this guy I had a crush on who later became my first boyfriend was like, oh, you guys want mushrooms? Here's a bag. And we gave him all of our money. And now I've looked up in hindsight and I Googled like that much money at that time, the bag, the grams. And I'm like, oh my God, I was like maybe like 80 or 90 pounds. And I had like a full-on hero's dose of mushrooms. Anyways, regardless, I had no personality. I was not a human. I was consciousness floating through space. And after that, I was like, whoa, this world is like not what I thought it was. Like I am a soul inside a body here to evolve. I just got such a shift on, and it took me 6 months after that to like work through I guess now I can see it as like a nihilism where I'm like, nothing matters. Like, what the fuck is this human stuff? Why would I be stressed about the SATs? College doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Like, I'm actually this existing flesh. Like, I'm just like what we really are. Does anybody see what we are? And so it tripped me out. But I had no context because there wasn't an internet. I couldn't look anything up. I was just like, whoa, this world's a trip. But so anyways, I know I'm being a little like animated. What that is still like my core belief. And that's really now, after leaving AA, that's the only thing I'll rest my identity on. I am a soul inside a body here to evolve, meaning this is all about evolution. I'm here to evolve. So things are going to happen, learn from them, move on, do better. And my identity is more on learning and evolving than any little label. Because look at the labels we have now. We had different labels 10 years ago, different labels 50 years ago, and the labels can limit us. So I'm kind of like almost like a PTSD against it, but they're helpful at the same time. So the other thing I really want to say quickly to Taylor is when it comes to something like Alcoholics Anonymous and recommending it, I really liked your approach in a podcast I heard of you when you were saying that you don't recommend antabuse necessarily, and that one person really was very adamant about they really wanted it. And you're like, we got naltrexone, we got other things, but they really wanted it. So you said, okay, fine, you this is what you really want because it's about agency. And I really like that. And I wish that that was the conversation around Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not the first go-to. It's not the second. It's not the third. But if the person really wants it, sure, here's the meeting list. Not have at it, pal. So that's kind of like really how I see it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's an ethical way to advocate for people, but there's no like formula that's put out to everyone that they can find and then go, oh, like, and of course there's like certain ethics when it comes to like, let's say that you have specific licensure, or, there's codes of ethics for professionals and stuff. But then like, when we're looking at just the average person, it's like, well, how do I go about this? And the way that we go about it culturally is from an authoritarian, paternalistic place. And so it's like any chance we get to just like steer someone in the direction of some sort of coercive control seems like the best option, because we know subconsciously or consciously that this will be controlling them and putting up these strong boundaries that then will be seen to protect them, when in reality it can be the very thing that harms them, especially tying back to what we're talking about in identity and these labels. And I think it's really important what you're touching on when it comes to a diagnosis being a roadmap or a compass to actually find something that is sustainable for you, that you can engage in, whether it's like a health solution, an alternative, a philosophy, whatever. And it's, look, I really hard to what you're saying about labels, diagnosis. It makes you very, it's like I walk on eggshells around a lot of that stuff because of the really adverse experience with 12 step. It definitely is scary when you find, oh, wow, I've been indoctrinated into something that I would say objectively is not true based on evidence or based on any sort of valid science. It's just something that is based in tradition and dogma, and so when you break free from that, it's like, don't really want to end up in another space like that. You know what I mean? And so it's something that I've, without sharing too much, I have things in my life that I engage in that you could relate to that cult in a way. And I've had to be very, very careful and had to really question that and engage carefully. But this is something that I wanted to bring up to you, but I forgot. It just like came to me and then went away a couple times throughout our conversation today. But if you're cool with it, I think if we use kind of the last few minutes to kind of touch a little bit on, and we'd love to have you back so we can expand on some more stuff. But I would love to hear a little bit about leaving and psychologically what came up for you, and just what that was like, because I can just say from my experience, it is terrifying. And when you've been told that you're going to die basically if you leave. So how did that manifest for you? And of course, now I'm going to backtrack, but really quick, totally hearing what you're saying with the more esoteric psychedelic stuff, the Yeah, we're on the same page with that for sure. And I think a lot of people will understand completely where you're coming from. I used to see myself as, I'm experiencing depersonalization and derealization because I was, again, looking at it through this clinical lens. And then I started to look at it like, no, I just understand that this body is temporary and I'm really just like in it. And I'm tapped in with that pretty consistently, but I had to try to like pathologize it somehow. So yeah, I'll stop with that. But let's just go back to, what was it like leaving? What came up for you psychologically? Was it extremely challenging? Did it feel like more of a relief initially? Like, what did that process look like?
Well, thanks. First, I wanted to say, Macaulay, that I really related to the part of your story that I heard where you grew up with your parents or culture or the people around you where it was very normalized to use substances. Like that was part of, I think that's what I heard you say, where you just assumed that might be, that it just seemed normal. And that was my experience too. I grew up where it was very normalized. Like I just always thought I was going to use drugs because that was what the conversations always were. Literally, my parents got married very young and they went to Woodstock on their honeymoon. That tells you all you need to know about the family that I grew up in. and then they came out to San Francisco right after the Summer of Love. Woodstock was a couple years later. And so I just kind of always grew up in that I was going to, of course, I'm going to experiment. I want to understand consciousness, different things like that. So, that was I just really related to you on that. I was like, yeah, me too. And then obviously the benzo stuff, I was like, yeah, I understand getting off benzos. It's fucking brutal. And I was so surprised at first that I have all these benzo videos on YouTube that just like blew out. And I've gotten hundreds, if not thousands of emails from people about coming off benzos because it's so hard. So I really have a lot of just empathy, even for your early sobriety journey with all the meds that you were on, Macaulay, trying to like come back to, I guess, homeostasis. I was on, was it gabapentin? I think you said I was on Neurontin and gabapentin to come off the benzos. So I really related to your story in general too. And Taylor, I really appreciate all the work that you're doing, and that you've taken your hero, your father, and your own experience and your brush with death to really make a difference. And I love that you guys are a team because you have like the perfect combination of backgrounds and experience to really deliver this message and really reform it. Like, I don't know. I'm so happy you guys are doing what you're doing. And I wanted to make sure, if we're running out of time, that I just say that like, I'm really, really pleased with the reform and the movement you guys are doing. And I don't know. Proud's not the right word, but happy, excited, delighted. I don't know what it is, but like, I feel like I'm going to cry and I don't know. I'm really grateful for all that you guys do. I think it's really important. And I hope your channel blows up and everybody gets to see you because your voices, but your message should be amplified like as far and wide as possible. So I want to make sure I don't forget to say that.
Thank you so much. You're so sweet. And again, we would love to have you on this journey anytime. And we'd love to have you as a recurring guest.
Appreciate having you on. And I want to make sure that we get an opportunity to like shout out to you and plug all of your things too. You are also a creator. You have a channel. You're doing amazing things. You have your own website, YouTube, etc. You want to tell folks where they can find you?
Yeah, if you like to watch things on YouTube, I'm Sobriety Bestie on YouTube. If you like to listen to podcasts, Sobriety Bestie podcast. And do we have time for me to tell you what it was like to leave AA? I needed to do the just express. I don't know. I just see, that's why I'm like, I do kind of relate to the autism ADHD thing because I just like erupt in like this like passion, and then I'm like, wait, that wasn't what I was. They didn't ask me that question. They didn't say, "What do you love about me?" They said, "How was it leaving AA?" And I'm,
We'll take it. And I mean, look, you're in good company because I think that we probably manifest the same way with that stuff. So I don't misunderstand it at all. I'm like, okay, yeah. So I like it. But yeah, I mean, we can definitely, if you want to just, I guess we try to keep it at like an hour. So if you want to just go into that and just kind of share what that was like, and then we'll wrap it up from there.
Okay. Yeah, it was so, and that's why I'm asking if I can just say this part, because for anybody who's going through it right now, it was literally the hardest thing that I've ever done in my entire life is leave Alcoholics Anonymous. And so if you're in that right now, anybody who's listening or watching, like, and it feels really hard, or you're feeling like you're mind fucked, or you're feeling it's literally the only time I've ever had unaliving thoughts in my head is when I left AA. It was really scary. There were a couple of dark days there. It was only 2 days that was happening, but that had never happened to me before. I had lost all my friends. The pandemic wasn't so hard for me personally. I mean, I know it was, obviously I wasn't on the front lines, Taylor. I did see some of your interviews and stuff. Like, I was like, oh wow, like he was really in it. I was in Indonesia, living in Bali. We weren't really locked down. It was the island emptied out. It was really empty. The beaches were empty. I was just walking a dog on the beach mostly. But leaving AA was really hard because I was completely emotionally dysregulated. I had been self-medicating with alcohol, and then I had been self-medicating with AA, and then now I have nothing. So I need to learn how to regulate myself without self-medicating. I didn't know who I was. I had an identity crisis. It was a dark night of the soul, similar to that first mushroom experience. Or I've had other dark nights of the soul too, where it's like, I don't know who I am anymore. My emotions are all over the place. Most of my friends are shunning me. I can't talk. I can't share my story. I can't be honest with anybody because I know I'm either going to be harming the newcomer, or I still had the ideology in my head, and I couldn't find anybody who I felt like was telling the truth that I respected. Either people were really angry, which was understandable, but I couldn't find anybody who like felt like they had been through it, were well adjusted, and they could be like a role model to tell me the steps that they took to pull through leaving AA and how they got to the other side. And I was still in that angry and stuff. So I just couldn't find anybody to validate it. I would buy books of like famous people and authors, and I would read through, and I'd just be disappointed that nobody would say it's not, most likely not a disease. And most people don't even think about it as a disease. It's not fatal progressive. You're not going to die. I hired a therapist to help remove the fear of you're going to die. And that took me months to stop thinking that I was going to die. So I left thinking I was about to die because I was like, it's over. I have to be willing to walk into what's next. And so, yeah, it took me months of therapy to realize that I'm not going to die. And I really did a lot of deprogramming that first year. And then I thought I was good. And then on my 5 years after leaving AA day, I decided I finally needed to talk about it. Like, it was building up inside me that I need to talk about it, but I was not letting myself because I was scared. And finally, on my 5-year anniversary of leaving AA, I said on the internet, I fucking left AA. I didn't think it was a religious cult yet at that point. But it exploded. And there was like, literally, I spent like 8 hours a day responding to people because my Facebook blew up, and it was like something erupted on my Facebook page, and everyone's calling me, reaching out to me, commenting, mostly positive. People had been wanting to say the same thing, that they'd anonymously left. And I just really feel that we're hungry for it right now. I think that's what it was speaking to. A lot of us have left and feel isolated, alone. And I think the most dangerous, one of the harms even of leaving AA, is that we don't know that we have deprogramming to do, likely. I was a true believer, so I have a lot of work. And by making videos almost every day for the past 4 months online, it's required me to do a lot of research and that has allowed me to deconstruct even more. And I feel like I'm still kind of at the beginning of my healing journey, which started basically 5 years after. I mean, I thought I was done that first year. Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of people walking around who left AA silently and anonymously, who are living with the ideology in their head. So they're not trusting themselves. They're not critically thinking. And those people, I think, need to hear the message. And that's why all of this is why I'm really excited that you guys are doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. I mean, you're a shining example of that. I mean, we talk about it, obviously, which is like, not common with a podcast that has the term recovery in the title. It's usually just going to be blindly co-signing that or paying lip service to it, or just like, passively, supporting it. But yeah, you very, very perfectly articulated what it's like to leave. And for me, it was definitely a sense of isolation. You don't really know who's safe to talk to when it comes to this, because you've been taught that the feelings that you have are just resentments, and that it's just there's something wrong with you. And and we can be people who leave and we do not have any sort of returns to use at all, which is like the basis in which 12-steppers would like see or evaluate if we're valid or not. Like, did you use? Okay, definitely your opinion is not valid at all, which is a whole other conversation. But for those of us who leave and don't return to use, and who are very well versed, I think it's extremely important for us to speak out. because we're actually speaking from an informed perspective. And that's why when I saw your content, it was a breath of fresh air for me, because I was like, oh, she understands this. Like she deeply understands this, and again is like who I would consider to be an expert on this. And I love that you're engaging in this humility, which is for me an important part of this process, is to go, hey, I still have a lot to look at. I'm gonna have to still kind of keep unpacking this, and that's the beauty of not being active cult member, is that your understanding doesn't end at the first 164 pages, the steps, the traditions, the concepts, and the 12 and 12. Your understanding you're always going to be seeking new knowledge. You're always going to be open to new peer-reviewed studies. And so you perfectly encompassed all of that when it comes to your ability to look into studies and actually competently read them, which is hard. Like all of this other stuff, it comes together perfectly. And I think people, it's important to tell people, like, hey, it can be okay. I don't always want to say it's gonna be okay, because it can be very, very hard, but everything can be okay if you look at this stuff, you start to unpack it, and have compassion towards yourself. Stop, engaging in these labels is one of the huge things I think is very important. That's the initial thing you can let go of. But yeah, like yourself, I a year into my process of deconstructing and deprogramming, I was like, oh, I'm good now. And then there were life experiences that came up, and I was like, ooh, I am not good now. Like I really have a lot to learn. And I think that life would be boring if we weren't continually learning and unpacking and unlearning, and so you perfectly articulated the kind of the process of the initial feelings, just to recap, the initial feelings where you're submitting to something that doesn't feel right to you, but then the indoctrination process through coercion, and then identifying, and experiencing great loss in those spaces, which many of us, we experience this. We lose people we love and care about, and that's often what shakes us somewhat awake. And then the process of transitioning out and really just engaging in our autonomy and taking agency within our lives. And I just think you perfectly laid that out in a really clear and concise way. So I genuinely appreciate it. I'd love for you to come back. We'd love to have you back, and we can unpack a little bit more of this. But again, anyone who is interested, I strongly recommend checking out Kirsten's content. So you can find that. Basically, you're saying primarily you're on YouTube. And then again, your website one more time is
Sobriety Bestie.
SobrietyBestie.com, .org. What do we?
.com. Sobriety Bestie and all the things. If you want to DM me, Instagram's probably the easiest for that. But just find me Sobriety Bestie if you want. Send me a message. Let me know what's going on. Yeah, you're not alone. There's a lot of us out here doing just fine. A lot of people decide to drink again. If I were going to drink again, I would use naltrexone. I like the Sinclair method. I have no plans on doing it. I've deconstructed plant medicine. I did ayahuasca. Whoa, that was crazy. In Peru a couple of years ago. My intuition said go. And my commitment isn't to abstinence, but I also don't consider ayahuasca a relapse. I don't even think about relapse anymore. But to me, my commitment is to not betray myself anymore. AA was a huge betrayal, a self-betrayal. My commitment is to trusting my gut. Even if my gut says, get on a plane and go to Peru and go to the jungle and the Amazon. I'm like, what the fuck? I don't even like psychedelics. Like, they freak me out. And I hadn't done them since the 90s, since I was a little kid. I'm like, what the fuck? I don't want to do that again. But I will trust my gut no matter what. And that's just my core message, is trust your gut no matter what. That's why I don't know what anyone should do, because I'm not your gut.
Yes.
And
awesome.
We will
Thank you so much.
All of your links in the show notes so people can find them. Check out Sobriety Bestie. Kirsten, thank you so much for coming on. We will certainly coordinate to have you back. Okay.
Would love it. This has been such a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Thank you so much. Bye, y'all.
Views and opinions discussed on this podcast are personal and do not reflect the views or opinions of our employers. Although medical and clinical topics may be discussed in this podcast, the information provided is not medical nor clinical advice. Thank you for watching and/or listening.